We do general civil litigation and some criminal defense as well. It's interesting you brought me on for a veterans podcast. We've helped veterans along the way for years.
And let me ask you, what are some of the particular needs that you felt that were unique to this demographic?
Working with their counselors, making sure they're getting treatment for anything they need. But the court, by and large, has been open to deferred treatment or deferred punishment.
How's it going, guys? Here we are. We're bringing in Hasson Barnes. He is a lawyer. He has expertise in family law, real estate, criminal defense, guardianship, and child and need assistance. Count a wide array of knowledge in the field of law. So we brought him on because we understand that a lot of you guys are dealing with situations, whether mostly, I know a lot of divorce, a lot of criminal. So this is an opportunity to see this perspective that I know affects us financially. I know I've been through my own financial woes, my own legal woes, and I've had to learn the hard way how to figure this out. But Hasson, how you doing today?
Jamie, how are you? Great to see you.
Same. So let's start with this. What's your background? Tell us a little bit about you.
So I'm an attorney here in Maryland, representing clients across the spectrum. We do general civil litigation and some criminal defense as well. Locally, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland. I've been here my whole life. I'm a local guy. We work towards helping individual clients get the best possible outcomes. It's interesting you brought me on for a veterans podcast. We've helped veterans along the way for years. I've previously volunteered at veteran nonprofits, helping veterans and supporting veterans when they came home. We have assisted veterans in every aspect of law, in criminal defense, in divorce cases, whether active duty and non-active duty, in general business representation. I mean, veterans are all over in the community, and we've helped quite a few. And sometimes they have particular needs that we've had to deal with, and we've been able to help them in that process.
And let me ask you, what are some of the particular needs that you felt that were unique to this demographic?
So we've had criminal cases where veterans have been accused of committing criminal offenses, and there were underlying issues from their deployment. And when we've had those cases, we've gotten involved and we were able to find other ways to resolve it than them getting criminal records, such as working with the VA, working with their counselors, making sure they're getting treatment for anything they need. But the court, by and large, has been open to deferred treatment or deferred punishment when we say, no, this is a veteran. They have particular needs. They may have committed a transgression, but only because of these reasons. But you have to know it exists. Your client has to tell you, hey, I'm struggling with this. And then when it happens, you can help them through the process. Another issue has been housing. We've seen quite a few veterans struggle with housing and housing security. So we've been able to refer veterans out to different agencies and or providers to find housing that's been secure and been reasonable. We've seen veterans across the spectrum. Some veterans are very high achievers after they leave the military. In this area, we have a lot of government contractors. So veterans are able to go in and become contractors and do very well. But there's a lot of veterans who are not doing well. So we've helped veterans on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's I never even considered the, obviously we talk about homeless vets, and I'm sure housing security is a major factor. Again, things that I had never considered, the tying things to a deployment, which and maybe it's because I'm a vet myself that I default to thinking it's a bad thing, when in reality, again, I'm sure that nobody's saying, well, maybe they did committed that transgression, but there's a lot more to it. Maybe it's not black and white, right? And that's where
exactly.
And
no, I mean, for us, PTSD is real. When people are deployed, and some clients who actually weren't deployed but still suffered, those kind of things affect everything you do in society going forward. We can't just close the door and pretend it didn't happen and pretend they're not suffering. So we have to make some arrangements and some provisions for conditions veterans may be going through.
Yeah, and let me ask you, when it does happen and they've committed the transgression, Uh, and again, I don't know anything about law. Do they get I don't know if the right word is prosecuted as full criminal, or could they be? Is there uh, less time in jail or situations that
So
it could?
yeah, in the case that we've had, where we've had veterans who were accused of committing crimes, we was able to get deferred sentences. So either we would say, "Hold on, Your Honor, postpone it out. Let's give him treatment and push it out as far as possible and see what happens," or okay, he'll be on probation, but he won't be found guilty. He'll be on probation as long as he does A, or he or she does
Oh,
A, B, C, and D. And A, B, C, and D is typically find employment, go to treatment with the VA, and go on a regular basis and take your medication. In those cases, that's required. And after you're done, you won't have a conviction. So those have been the ways. So you're still prosecuted, but it's a different way that we can
mhm.
actually get rid of the case, and give the veteran support and all the things he needs.
That's awesome. I appreciate you for the support. And with that, have you ever? Do you find that veterans live up to the circumstance, or is person to person? Some people end up, they get out of their probation, they mess it all up, they don't do their treatment, or are you noticing that it's mostly they stick with it?
So our experience has been they stuck with it. Now it could be the weight over the head that if I don't do this, I may go to jail. So I have additional incentive to follow through. So
Yeah,
our clients have followed through, but they have incentive to follow through. Now
that's
after they
good.
are off probation, we typically, once a person is in a good place and once they have all their needs met, whether it's mental health, whether it's physical security, whether it's financial security, they typically aren't committing crimes. We don't see a lot of adults, veterans out there breaking laws when they have all the things they need to be secure.
Wow. That's I mean, that's good to hear, because I mean that's my demographic, my line of work, right? I focus on the financial side, which I never ignore PTSD, family stressors, whatever, but financial stress is where I'm trying to mitigate that aspect. Um and I don't know if you can share this. Does your or does the legal system in Maryland, or do law firms, do they have means for service members and veterans to access your services? Is it at a different cost? Is it pro bono? Because again, I'm just asking because I don't know anything about that.
So I don't know. I don't know of any programs that are pro bono. So our services are the same price for a veteran as non-veterans. There may be
Okay.
some services around. I've talked to a couple of nonprofits, who were supporting veterans, and they indicated they had funds to help support veterans. But I haven't seen on large scale, veterans being supported financially,
Yeah.
for legal purposes. Now, the VA does a great job in supporting them for medical purposes, and
Hmm.
benefits. But when it comes to hiring outside counsel, I haven't seen much funds for that. No.
Okay. And not that I expected, it was just a matter of curiosity. I'll share with you a funny story. Maybe you can you've heard of this. I had a friend that got in trouble in Japan, but it was a military matter. And he ended up having to hire an American lawyer to fly over there to handle this matter. Have you had any experience with that, having to be defense counsel or counsel for a service member outside of the area of Maryland?
So, yes, well, I've had retired military personnel have issues in other countries. It hasn't resulted in me traveling to that country, but I have had that happen. We represent clients in Maryland, but what happens is people are transient. So we have clients all over the country. Just because they live in Maryland or from Maryland doesn't mean they were on a vacation in California or on vacation in
Yeah.
Florida or get into trouble in Wyoming. So we from time to time have had situations where a client got in trouble in a foreign state, and what we do normally is hire someone. We hire a firm in that state to help them out if we can't resolve it
Mm,
ourselves.
got it. Because in as for what I understand, the bar is state specific, right? You are
It is.
not licensed to practice in another state.
That's correct.
Got it. Awesome. Well, and I'll tell you my only what is it? I read this book is like how to win every argument, but a famous lawyer in Wyoming. But it was a very compassionate written book. The title is very it just people think that it's going to be something else, like how are you going to argue everything, and that's not the how to and it's not the point. Um, so with that, what are there um in the field of law, right? I think that a big one that I have that people are always stressing about goes back to divorce, right? Say somebody is getting a divorce, you and maybe I am assuming that is person to person, but you as a counsel, as an attorney, what suggestions do you tell, and if they're the same or different, male and female, as they move forward on the divorce?
So divorces are interesting. For service members, divorce is a civil issue. So the civilian courts handle divorce exclusively.
Mm-hmm.
One thing members have is their retirement. Depending on how many years, I think it's 10 years your spouse would vet. So you've married 10 years, they have a right under military or federal law to your retirement. But with the way the law works is the state courts determine the options in divorce, not the federal courts.
Mm-hmm.
So each member is held to the state standard in terms of divorce. One thing that's hurtful for members is deployment. If you're married to a woman or man and you deploy and you have small children, well, you can't take care of the kids because the kids are with the other parent. Well, when it's time to go for a divorce and for custody, who the court's going to give the kids to? Well, the person who's had the kids most of the time and the person who did not deploy. So we've
Mm.
seen, and we oftentimes give orders and we fashion orders in family court for the deployment. So we'll say mom and dad will have 50-50 possibly, but when they deploy, dad will have the kids all the time while mom is away being deployed. Well, what it does is it incentivizes the non military parent because they have the children more. They have the
Mm-hmm.
children more so they can request more time going forward. They also can request a larger child support because once you have the kids all the time and mom is in Kuwait or Afghanistan or Iraq, um, and she's being paid by the U.S. government, they know she's making money, but the
Yeah.
children are here with dad. Then that's a hard thing. So when she comes home, say you're married, she's married to a gentleman, and she's in deployed in Kuwait. He's in Baltimore County. If you filed for divorce, she had no leg to stand on. What she gonna say? I want joint custody. You in Kuwait?
Yeah.
Are the kids going to Kuwait? Probably not. Probably not. Do kids want to go to Kuwait? Probably not.
Yeah.
So you're in a situation where it is ready made for the non-military spouse to have an upper hand in terms of who should have the children more.
Yeah. And that's what I've always heard. With the retirement, is that happen in the civilian sector as well for non-military people? They can also lose their retirement.
Well, so yes, non-military people. If you're married to someone, so under in Maryland, every state different. Maryland law, anything acquired during a marriage is marital property. Acquired is a very interesting word. Acquired means anything you receive, including your paycheck. So
Mm.
people assume acquired means she and I went together and bought something. No, 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 no. When you got paid last Friday, you acquired some money. That money you acquired belonged to you and your spouse. The fact that you worked for it doesn't matter. You acquired it together because you worked. So that means your retirement is accruing as you're working. That means every dollar paid into your retirement, whether from your employer, the U.S. military, or you pay yourself, is going towards your retirement. That's marital funds. So the
Mm.
other person has a direct interest in those funds.
Yeah. That's and acquired. I'm stuck on like it's a funny word because it is a funny word. Like who defines what's acquired, right? Uh, Now, I know a lot of people are do not have prenuptial agreements. What are your views on prenuptial agreements?
So we typically get prenups from people who are younger. The people come in for prenups are younger adults who are starting their career, and they decide either them or their partner thinks it's a good idea because one person may have a longer runway than the other, or
Right.
their parents say, "Hey, I'll pay for you to do a prenup." I've had quite a few women actually come in and want a prenup because their parents say, "I'll pay for it. I'll pay for you to do a prenup. Pay the lawyer, get one done because we think it's in your best interest." Prenups aren't bad things. They get a bad rap. I think people should want to do a prenup if you foresee having a higher income. The goal is to get married and not ever get divorced. You want to marry your husband and wife and be married for life. The reality is that's not always the case.
Hmm.
Oftentimes people separate for all kind of reasons. If you don't get a prenup, then everything. So a prenup is a contract where you define marital property different from what the law says. The law provides marital property is anything acquired on a marriage. A prenup skips that and say we're going to define this way. And if we separate, you get this, I get that. It defines before the court can get involved, what you get, and the court uphold prenup. So the judge don't want to decide who gets the fine china, who gets the car. If you decide for them, they're fine with that. So a prenup is a way where you can actually define to the court who get what in the event that you actually separate. And you don't got to be a millionaire to do a prenup or have $100 million. You can be an average person working a 9 to 5 and do a prenup if it's important for you to maintain certain assets.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And uh, I got I've been divorced twice. I don't want to do it again. It's absolutely terrible. I would put it as by far one of the worst experiences in my life. But my second marriage, we had a prenup, and we ended up not using it because we looked at it as that, and unfortunately for her, it was like, if we go through with this, it may hurt you more. And she's
Mm-hmm.
like, let's not use that. So we just didn't even present it to the court, and we just moved on. Which let me to understand a little more about it. I think more people uh, should at least explore it, right? I think that not enough people consider it, and then you end up in a bad situation. With that, with a prenup, can you protect your retirement?
If you choose to, if both parties agree in the prenup that my retirement shall not be grounds or should not be part of the divorce, then yes, it will be excluded from the divorce. The prenup
Wow.
is a contract where you and your partner go in with open eyes and agree to all the terms. So if you don't want to add the retirement, if you don't want to add the business income, if you don't want to add all those things, the prenup will exclude it out, and the court will say, okay, you guys agreed before you got married, you knew what you got into. We're not going to say anything otherwise. We're going to hold you to your word. Your word was no divorce, no retirement, so we believe you.
Yeah. That's a I had never considered that even a young man, military, so many kids get married in their young 20s that it's almost worth it. Just pay for your prenup, and if anything, protect your retirement, right? It's like, hey, it's my retirement, right? That could
Everyone
be
out
a
there, we do a lot of prenups, and people who do prenups at the time, quite a few don't have any means. I've had people come in with no jobs and got prenups because they were looking towards a job in the future. They were in medical school or different, and they wanted a prenup. So prenup don't mean you have money. You can do a prenup. So you got to pay for your lawyer, but you can do a prenup even though you don't have the means you think you're going to get one day. It's a smart thing to do. It's a contract. It shouldn't be. It's not very romantic. If your spouse not going to like it, but it may be helpful if you do it on the front end when you have nothing. People don't expect anything.
right. No, that's huge, and I think I try to take an approach in the world of finance that there's all these ancillary skills. I think of it like almost like working out, right? Like a football player doesn't need to curl to be a better football player, but he needs to curl
Hmm.
to stay healthy, right? So these are some of the skills that we need to, at least knowledge that we need to have. Let me ask you: do you do estate planning at all? Is that something that you understand?
So we do some, and we don't do much of it. So we do only in terms of basic wills, basic power of attorneys, basic
Okay,
health. So a will is a document that would identify to the court and your family how you want to resolve your estate, which means all the things you own during your life that belong to your estate when you pass. So you may say, "Hey, I got a piano that's been down in the family, and my niece is going to have this piano. I want her to have it." So everyone involved, everyone know this piano goes to my niece. So if you
hmm,
pass and there's a will, no one can take the piano. The law assumes the wishes of the person who died first before anything else. So we do basic wills. I think they're helpful. A power of attorney sometimes is needed for a state case. So as we get older, we may lose capacity.
hmm,
And once you lost capacity, which means you can't make your own decisions, you can't sign a power of attorney. We advise our clients who are older to have a power of attorney either for their children, to be the person in charge of their spouse, so that if you get sick, they can come in and do things for you, pay your bills, manage your accounts. If you have a power of attorney that they sign and it's valid, everyone will take it. There's also
right,
what's called a healthcare power of attorney, which means the person who decides what happens to you in the event you fall ill. What happens to you if you're in a coma and you can't make your own decision about your health care? A healthcare power of attorney does that. It either tells the doctors, example of that could be a person with a DNR. If I get sick and my heart stops beating, don't bring me back. Or it can say, hey, if I get sick and my heart starts beating, I don't care. Use every life saving measure known to man to keep me alive. If I have no
Hmm.
brain function, I don't care. Push air in my chest. You have the option as a person, while you're still competent, to make that decision. You can either make it yourself, or you can say, I'll say this: my mother, when I was younger, my mother and uncle were very close, and he was
Hmm.
married, he had family, but he could make my mother his power of attorney for a healthcare power of attorney or healthcare directive because he knew his wife couldn't make a decision if he got sick. He got sick and ultimately passed, and his wish were to pull the plug. He knew
Hmm.
his wife and daughter, my cousin, would not do it. My mother, his sister, would. So he made her the person say, no, 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 doctor, don't talk to my wife, don't talk to my daughter, don't talk to them. My sister's here. She's going to be the one who make the decision. And as a kid, I thought it was weird. Like, why wouldn't his wife decide? Why is it you, mom? Why are you the one who making the decision? Because he knew he didn't want to be on a ventilator, and he knew his wife wouldn't make that decision. She would keep him around as long as possible, and so would his daughter. But his sister, he knew she would do what he wanted. So he was very intentional about that. We all
Right.
should be that way. We all should be, because we determine how we are treated even when we're sick. So that's another example of things you can do as part of your estate. Um, Another thing is, I mean, we people do trust. People have all kind of things they leave for their children and their family when they pass. Trust, we don't do many trusts, but I would say if you are amassing wealth, and we have quite a few veterans who do very well financially. If you're
Hmm.
amassing wealth and you have a bunch of money, you want to make sure it's handled a certain kind of way. You may want to talk to a lawyer about a trust. It may help you defer costs for your taxes, but it also may set you up in a situation where you can have money aside for your family, in a much more particular way than a will can provide for.
Right. No, and that's like I do a lot of I don't do trust myself, but I have a firm that I've done them with, and I'm always it's good to hear because it's especially when you start amassing wealth. And looking through your website, just to move on to something else, I know you spoke a little bit on child stuff, but on real estate, because and I want your perspective on real estate. Again, I'll share you my experience. I have a neighbor that so happens that my neighbor is the dean of law, former dean of law at a school, so he understands the law. And we got in an easement argument, and it was like incredibly annoying, right? Just dealing with this back and forth with a guy that I know understands the law. And I'm not saying they were bullying me. I felt bullied more because I don't know, right? This guy knows, and I don't know. So when it comes to tenant and real estate problems, right? Because ultimately it comes down to a financial issue. And again, seeking legal counsel is expensive. What are some of the major issues that you see in the real estate and tenant space?
So, two things. Real estate generally, with the issues are ownership. Who owns what property?
Hmm.
Tenant is different. That's when you're a tenant and you're renting the property or leasing the property as an individual tenant or as a commercial. Let's start real estate first.
Okay.
If you own the property, and what we see, oftentimes, we have veterans who may be landlords and who are being sued for their property. If you're a veteran and you're being sued and you're out of the country, they can't get a default against you. Not in Maryland; other states are different. But in Maryland, the court is very clear that if you're a veteran, there can be no default if you're deployed, because
Mm,
obviously you can't respond to a complaint if you're in Qatar. It doesn't
right.
work, and you shouldn't be required to. So it stays any kind of lawsuit, from any default while you're deployed. So when
Hmm.
you file claims here, you have to list, is the person in the military, and if they are they deployed? If they're not, how do you know? So you have to certify the person is not in the military to go forward with a case to get a default. A default for the audience is a judgment against a person without them having to answer.
Mm,
Defaults happen all the time in property cases. But again, a protection military personnel get is if you're in the military and you're active duty, there should be no default against you because obviously you can't respond to any claim. And we see that particularly with landlords who are veterans,
hmm.
and with active duty service members. Real estate is interesting because once you own it, it can be used as part of your estate. Veterans have benefits in terms of purchasing real estate. VA loans are a thing that you guys get that other members of society don't get, and they favorable to you. Um, is multiple ways that veterans have benefits over non-veterans in terms of property. Now, landlord tenant, if you're a tenant and you're a veteran, that goes a certain kind of way. We've had veterans who have been deployed, even though they were renting property. They didn't plan on being deployed. Either they decided that they weren't going to reenlist and they changed their mind. I had one veteran who got deployed and she owned a home and she was trying to rent the property to someone while she was deployed. She couldn't do it; it didn't work out. Um, and but it's all kind of things that come into play. But it's a more particular situation. If you're a veteran, don't be afraid to buy property because you're afraid you can't manage it. Hire a company to manage it for you and let the property grow, let the money build. But I suggest you still buy the property if you can buy the property, especially if you can get VA loans that are much more favorable to you than a non-VA loan. As far as renting property, we see some veterans who uh, have limitations have a hard time finding property. If you've been in military and you've been doesn't don't have real credit history, you don't have a rental history, it's hard for you to find a place to live. If you've come home from deployment and things didn't go well, it's going to be hard for you to find a place to live. So as far as leasing, it's incumbent upon veterans to find agencies that support veteran and veteran causes to help them find property to lease and places to live. Because unfortunately, landlords want to see your last 3 or 4 residences and how long it's been since you had a residence. They don't want to hear I was away in the military, so I have no record of it. That
Yeah.
doesn't go well for a landlord, and they won't give you a lease if they feel like they can't trust what you're saying.
Yeah. No, and I just it's funny how you're explaining. I mean, it's interesting to me how you're saying that because it's not like the kid can go and say, "I live on base,"
Yeah.
or I'm deployed. Nobody cares, right? There's no proof of responsibility while you're doing that. And have you dealt with any evictions? And is that something you deal with, evictions with tenants? And again, maybe not this is not specific to veterans, just in general. Have you dealt with evictions? And if so, how do they work out in the state of Maryland?
So we've done quite a few evictions on both sides. For commercial and residential, as well as for landlord and tenant, we've done all the sides. So it's fairly simple. I mean, if you don't pay the rent, they can evict you from your property. If
Hmm.
you're a commercial tenant and you don't pay the rent, they can evict you from the property. It doesn't matter if commercial or residential. Um, Whenever you have a situation in Maryland, so in some states are very tenant friendly. I think New York City is very tenant friendly. Maryland can be, but it's not. I mean, it's fairly across the board. If you don't pay, they have an opportunity to get you out the property, and they can also charge you additional expenses, and they can force you to pay damages. So most folks rent an apartment. You may get a 2 bedroom apartment, um, $1,400 a month. You come in, you put some mirrors on the wall, a couple paintings on the wall, you change the color in the other room. All those things may be a violation of your lease.
Mm,
And while you're in the property, you may have damage to the bathroom. You fix it yourself. You may have a crack in the floor. It doesn't matter. The door may hit the wall, have a dent in the drywall. Those kind of things happen all the time. When you move out, the landlord will bill you for that. If they have to repaint the wall because you painted the room a different color, they bill you for it. If they say, "Oh no, the whole house got to get repainted because the walls are dirty," the law in Maryland provides that normal painting isn't something you can build a claim for unless it's beyond normal wear and tear. They say the walls were horrible. The walls were so dirty we had to paint it a whole different color and have found they can bill you for it. If they say,
mm,
"Oh, the carpet was worn," yeah, it's worn because I walked on the floor. Well, they can bill you for a worn carpet. So the landlord has all kind of ways to bill you for you're living in the property to recoup the profit in the property. So if you're a tenant living there, it's not in your favor, right? If you're
mm.
moving out and you're paying for carpet and you're paying for painting, and you're paying for patching walls, you may end up owing the money and the rent when you leave out of there, and that's never a good idea. Um, and the way the law works is the landlord has a right to do it, and they get it. The court is very open to giving landlords additional expenses when they say the tenant um, damaged the property, even if damage means lived in the property, right? We think damage means somebody ran through a wall. No, lived in property can be considered damage, it depending on how much wear and tear you have to the property.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, there's those kids who unfortunately are just a walking damage to that is going to happen, right? And
Kids and
no
pets.
fault.
If you have kids and pets, they're gonna have damage. Yes.
Yeah, nothing you can do about it, right?
Hmm.
So this is very interesting. I appreciate you going into depth into all of this, and with that, what would you say? in the world of law, as we come in and we interact with the law, obviously we don't want to break it, right? What are the major problems that you're like, let's say you get this case and you're just like, another one of these, right? You know you're going to build a client, but it's almost like a thorn, right? That why are we still dealing with this? What are cases that you deal with in that nature?
Well, things that we think clients should know, and whether veteran or otherwise. Landlord tenant is an example of that. Again, they move into places and they assume they can do things like paint walls. Well, probably not. Most leases provide you can't paint the wall. Put mirrors on the wall. That's a common thing to put art in your house. If you put holes in the wall, you get billed for them fixing those holes. And no one ever considers it when they move in. It only crosses their mind. When they
Mm-hmm.
move out, they notice it, they have to pay a bill.
Okay.
But the primary thing we see is just lack of knowledge about the law. It doesn't matter whether it's landlord tenant, criminal defense, family law, estates and trusts, guardianship. It doesn't matter what area of the law. Most citizens don't have a real good grasp on what the law says. Real estate, eminent domain. I mean, people get in trouble all the time because they didn't know, not because they had malice or ill will. They just didn't know.
Yeah.
Um, People like depending on what state you're in. Some states you can carry guns, some states you can't. I've had clients come from different states and go outside with guns, and they, oh, I was arrested for a gun. Why? Well, not in Maryland. You may can do that in West Virginia or Texas or other states, but you can't do that here. So here, the same thing you can do legally in another state will get you jail time real fast here. Everywhere you go, the laws can be different, and not only for guns, but all kind of things. How you buy property, how your estate is administered. The laws of every state have to be observed by the people in that state, and most citizens don't take time to know the basic laws for the state they're in.
And have you ever dealt with a case that like that a gun concealed carry left the state, entered Maryland, but you guys were able to get out of it? That the person was I don't know if you could share that that for whatever reason the person was innocent enough, so to speak,
No,
or
no. In Maryland, whenever my clients have been caught with guns, the they were prosecuted for gun. Now we may have gotten the charges dropped to a lower charge, but no, it wasn't.
got it.
Having a gun by itself was enough, and yeah, there was no way they said, "Oh, they didn't know they were from another state." The law and the court don't care about that at all.
Yeah, so I live in New Mexico, so it's interesting because every state has their own thing, right? And you
Yeah.
can leave Colorado, but you land in New Mexico, and it's like open carry. It's every state has their own thing, and I'm definitely not one to say which state is right or wrong. It's just whatever. It's the state, right? Abide by the state
Issue
laws.
is knowing where you are. So we see on TV people try to. So in Baltimore, often we have an airport, and it's always talking about how many people come to the airport with guns or try and get on the plane with a gun. And the idea was, well, you can't travel with a gun because you don't know the laws of the state you're going to, and no one wants you on a plane with a gun. That sounds like a bad idea. Unless, like the military personnel travel with their service weapons, they're under the plane. They're not on
Yeah,
your hip as you walk into the plane, having a seat, asking for a soda. No, that's not. It's too much risk for other members in the on the plane for one person to have a gun. But that's an example of it. That's the reason why you can't fly with guns because you don't know the laws of where you're going.
yeah. And with that, with not knowing the law and how at the end of the day, majority of people are not lawyers. How At what point do you suggest having counsel? And maybe this is an advanced, more business and bigger family. At what point should I have seek counsel that I have on retainer, so to speak, as like to protect myself? At what point are you guys seeing that?
For your audience, I would say always hire counsel. We'll put my name and number in the corner for you to call me. Just joking. I do suggest that people hire counsel whenever there's an issue of consequence. If you want to buy a property, you may want to hire counsel. Now, if you're going to a basic sale for personal property, your agent may be sufficient. If you're doing commercial property, you want to hire a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing anything that requires you to know a law and you don't know it, hire counsel. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to get an apartment, you don't. There's no law there that you have to know. You don't know. It's easy to figure out. Rent due on this day. If I don't pay by this day, I get fined. It's a
Right.
contract. That's the law of your tenancy, your contract. But if you're talking about issues with trust, you got to hire a lawyer. You want a
Yeah.
will? You can do a will yourself. You probably shouldn't hire a lawyer. You want to do healthcare directive? You can do it yourself. You can go to your hospital and get it done. You may want to hire a lawyer to make sure it's done the right way. Power of
Mm-hmm.
attorney. You can get one yourself. You can go online on LegalZoom and get one. Is that the
Yeah.
best option? Probably not. You may want to hire a lawyer. If you're doing contracts as a doing, so a lot of veterans come out and start their own businesses. I met quite a few veterans who do um, maintenance, janitorial, all kind of federal contracting, and but they don't hire lawyers, which means they don't know what
Mm.
they can and can't do. They don't know when they submit their bid whether or not they underbid themselves because they have additional contingencies for insurance. So no one thinks about insurance and what has to happen. They don't think about hiring employees and how you must hire them and pay them as employees. They think, oh, we'll pay them on the back end. No, no, the law don't provide for that. If you have somebody working, they got to get paid on the front end. They got paid when they
Yeah.
do the work.
Yeah.
Saying
Yeah.
I'll pay them when I get paid isn't sufficient. So those kind of things. Anything that you're not sure about the law, hire a lawyer.
Yeah, I like how you framed that as of consequence, and it reminds me of when I first started renting my properties. I, obviously you could go find rental contracts anywhere, but I was like, I'm gonna put somebody in my home I don't know, right? And that's probably me being a little more scared. I rather have something that was watertight and is paid off so far. So that's great. Now, what would you say? Let's say this was your audience. They jumped on and they were like, "Hey, this is what you need to know." What would you want to share to your audience or anybody in Maryland that happens to be looking for a lawyer and they just should reach out to you? I hope they reach out to you, but what would you pass on to the audience?
Anyone in Maryland who needs a lawyer, hire my firm, H. Barnes
Yeah.
Law. Short of that, when you want to hire a lawyer, the idea is like a doctor. You want someone who you can talk to, relate to. I can be the world best lawyer. I can be the world best litigator. If we can't get along, it doesn't work for you. It's not a good fit. Your lawyer should be someone you can talk to and someone you trust and you believe. It got to be a good fit. If it's not a good fit, you won't feel satisfied, no matter how good the lawyer is. That's my
Hmm.
number one. My number one tip: hire someone you can talk to and you feel comfortable with. If you felt the person's condescending or arrogant, maybe not. That could be a different person. They may need a different client, but you want to have a
Yeah.
lawyer where you can discuss and have a conversation with, and know they're telling you the right thing and that you trust them. So if you have a lawyer and they advise you, and you're like, yeah, I don't know though, maybe that lawyer isn't the right lawyer for you because if you
Yeah.
can't trust the lawyer and what they say, you want to hire somebody else and pay somebody else.
Yeah. Now, I agree that I recently heard something that Americans want lawyers, financial people, and doctors to have a social media presence just so that they can feel there's trust, right?
Mm.
Whether it's, and again, I know this all too well. I'm seeing it right now. I'm creating some level of trust. Maybe nobody trusts me at 100, but if I gain one more level of trust, it helps out. So it's very interesting study with that. Now, moving on to us learning the law, can you think of any books that you would suggest for the layman to be like, hey, this is a good law book? It may not, it's not gonna, uh, it's not terrible. It may be something you can digest. I don't know if that's something you know of, or maybe lawyers are not writing interesting enough books.
I'll say this: John Grisham is a lawyer. He writes great books, but
Yeah.
I don't know any law books per se to recommend to a layperson. I haven't. Interesting question. I've never heard that before. So I don't know any law books to recommend to a layperson. All the lawyers I know who write books is fiction. None of it is about the law in any real way. I think
Yeah.
because the law is so dynamic. So for your listeners, every state has their own law, and every state, every city, county has their own law as well. So I'm in Maryland. I'm in Baltimore City. So we have Baltimore City Code, and we have Maryland law on the same issue. So you mentioned landlord tenant. Baltimore City has a code that applies to landlord tenant that's different from the state statute.
Hmm.
So you have multiple instances where the state, local, and or federal have different laws in the same place, same time. It's incredibly hard for an author or for a lawyer to write a book to encompass all the things that's less than a million
Hmm.
pages long. It'd be so voluminous it wouldn't make sense. So I don't know any books. That means for the audience, if you need a lawyer, hire a lawyer. Being your own lawyer, it may not be the best option.
Yeah.
In our system, we allow for people to be pro se, which means you can go to court by yourself and you can make it work. We allow for the law to be published openly so you can read them yourself. Um, knowing the law, knowing where the courthouse is located, knowing the facts is no substitute for having an actual legal counsel, someone who's been trained in the law, someone who knows how the court works, how the law works. It's night and day. And I don't care how much education
Yeah.
you have. I don't care whether you're a PhD. It doesn't matter. is a PhD would do a much worse job than a first year lawyer who just started practicing. You know why? Because that first year lawyer is trained in the law and how to be a lawyer. The PhD who may been practicing as a PhD for the past 20 years doesn't have the same capacity for the law that the first year lawyer has. That's
Yeah.
my opinion. Some PhDs may say, "Mr. Barnes, you're wrong. We think we can do a great job." I don't agree.
Yeah, no, I could see that there's some grit for those of us that are younger and newer in a field of work. And now that you mentioned that, is interesting because when I got in that situation with my neighbor, they hired a lawyer. So they were both practicing lawyers, and they hired a lawyer for the council. And I noticed it immediately that I I was emotional. So it's like I would talk to my lawyer and I would say things, and he would be like, "Well, that really doesn't work like that." And I could tell it was my emotions and whatever. So a ton of feelings with that. But this has been great. Again, I'll go ahead and say it. If you're in Maryland, I know there's a lot of service members in Maryland. Go reach out to his firm. Let me find it. Law. What is the name? Is it Hasson Barnes? Your firm?
Yes, the law office of
Very good.
Hassan D. Barnes LLC or H. Barnes Law. That's
H
us.
Barnes.
Give us a call. Go to our website, hbarneslaw.com. We can help you. But I will, to your last point, lawyers hire lawyers. So that's a good point. When there's an issue that happens, lawyers are the first ones to hire an attorney. We recognize the issue may not be something we do all the time. And we know there's another guy across town that that's his whole career. We're going to hire him to do the job, even though we're lawyers as well. That's an example for people out there. You may not want to be your own lawyer. If a lawyer will hire a lawyer, you may want to hire one as well.
For sure. For sure. So yeah, guys, for everybody, the law's complicated. There's no good books for us to learn it unless you go to law school. And this is actually really useful. There's a lot of things that we need to understand with this. And again, Hassan, thank you so much for your time. This was actually way better than what I expected. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Take care, guys.
Awesome.
Pleasure. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right.